Hello, friends. Welcome aboard the Round Trip Stories podcast, where we share stories of moving around the world and back again, reflecting on the lessons we've learned along the way. My name is Melissa.
And my name is Tracy, and we are so glad you're joining us for today's episode. Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Melissa Ens, bilingual teacher, passionate learner, leader, and lover of people, and mother of 3. She and her young family became church capacity builders in Peru. And in our last episode, she shared stories about what she loved and what was hard while living there. In this episode, Melissa describes seeing signposts of everyone and everything not thriving as it should. So she and her husband made the decision to return to the U.S. before their assignment was supposed to be up. This made their transition back a painful one. What helped was a conference to process their return with others, Melissa recognizing her own grief cycle, going to therapy, and building new friendships. Melissa compassionately shares her story so that others know that, quote, jumping into a new culture or jumping back into an old culture is going to take your breath away. So buckle your seatbelts and make sure your tray tables and seats are in their upright positions as part 2 of Melissa's round trip story gets ready for takeoff. All right, Melissa, now we want to hear about your repatriation stories. How did those go? And let's start with, just give us a little background about when and why you left and had to return, and also how old your kids were when you came back. Where did you land, and what did you do at that point? And then what are you doing now?
We moved back to Fresno in May of 2014. And my daughter at that point was 13, and the boys were 10 and 6. And we moved back a few months prior to what originally would have been scheduled based on when our first term was supposed to end, because we wanted to have the summer to kind of get readjusted a little bit before school started. And then I homeschooled for a year, and then I got a job as a tutor at a charter school and did that part-time for a year. And then I did something else the next year. And then I did something else the year after that. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, I met you. And we got to connect when I was working at that charter school. But I kept doing different things. And then finally, these last few years, I got to have, I think, 3 years in a row working for a different school.
Yes.
Where I worked with homeschool families and got to work with you again. And so teaching has still been kind of throughout in different ways what I've been doing. And right now I am a tutor, and I work with homeschool kids, helping them with reading and math. And I'm involved in our church. And my husband ended up getting a job at a nonprofit here in Fresno, where he was the director that worked with Southeast Asian families primarily. And so that was an interesting change to go from Latin Peruvian culture to Southeast Asian culture. And that was, it was provision from God. So, but why we came back, that's the tricky question, really. When we moved to Peru, the goal was actually to be there for 10 years. And because that was our mission agency at that point sent people out for like really short-term things, or like long-term missionaries went for like, you basically signed up for 10 years. And so that's what we kind of thought we were doing. And we went and we tried to put down roots and tried to get established in such a way that we would be able to last for, multiple terms and, come back and visit the States and, visit people and then go back again, multiple times. But while we were there, I don't know if it's similar to how God didn't sign off on our plan to, when we first got married and we thought we knew how things were going to go. I don't know if I could say, I don't know if it's the same or not, but we went thinking we were going to be there for a long time, and it didn't work out that way. There were difficulties kind of on every side, and really, this goes into the next question, which is sort of about the transition, because I can't talk about our transition back without talking about why we had to come back.
Okay.
And kind of how we transitioned back is very much affected by how excruciating the decision was to come back in the first place. Because it wasn't what we had planned. It wasn't what we had wanted to do. But we just kept feeling like it was probably what we were supposed to do. And, at one point we even made a pros and cons list, or not pros and cons, but like made a list of all the like different things that could be signposts. Like, what's the health of our marriage like? What's the health of our kids? Emotionally, how is the work going? How is homeschooling going? How is our, just like kind of looking at all of these different sort of markers and kind of going, okay, so for this particular category, does this point towards us staying longer, or does this point towards us moving back to California? And I think that every single thing on the list, except for maybe one, was pointing towards moving back to California. In the middle of that season, when we were trying to figure out what to do, we had been there at this point for almost 2 years. And our youngest son, who at that point would have been 6, but he got sick. He got E. coli, and I think he also ended up getting treated for typhoid at some point. But he ended up being hospitalized, and it was a really scary, awful experience. He was in the hospital for, I think, 3 days, at least 2 nights. And so there was just a lot of stuff that just ended up being really hard. And so we finally decided that we needed to move back, that was what we were supposed to do. And so when we came back, we were so broken and just so hurting, because we had to say goodbye to so many people that we loved dearly. Mm-hmm. And we went to a debrief and renewal, DAR was what it was called, retreat kind of thing in Colorado with other missionaries and people that had been working overseas. And it didn't matter if they had just barely come back or if they had been back for a couple of years. It was just a place for people to come and process. And it was such a gift, because we were with other people that had been, gone through similar situations. And also we were people that weren't we weren't part of each other's worlds. So we could share honestly with each other, and without worrying about how it was going to affect our relationships moving forward, or, they know this other person that we are talking about or whatever. Like, it just was a safe place. And I remember one day sitting in one of the meetings, there were these giant picture windows on the back of the room, and that I was facing. And there were these train tracks not too far in the distance away from the building that we were in. And this particular day, there was this train moving slowly along those tracks, and it was carrying these giant pieces of something. And I was looking at it, trying to figure out what in the world is on those train cars. This was like flatbed with these giant things. I was like, what are those? And I finally realized they were the pieces for a wind turbine. Like, the big wind, like the giant, they look like fans, but they're, wind generators, turbine things, whatever. That, and I don't know where it was going. I don't know where it was coming from, but it had been taken apart, and it was being moved on this train from one place to another. And as I was watching it, I just felt like that was such a poignant metaphor for how I felt like we were at that point. Like, we had just been dismantled. And yet we were being transported from one place to another, and we were going to be put back together again. Just like that fan was going somewhere, and it was going to be put back together for a purpose. And so that's That's one of my stories
Oh,
about my
I love that story.
transition.
There's a lot of hope in that story. I mean, that journey on the train where you have fallen apart, it could be a long journey or it could be a short journey, but the end is the same, where you're back together again, you're functioning, you have an important purpose in where you are.
There might still be breakdowns and maintenance there will still be breakdowns and maintenance.
Yes. Parts that need to be replaced.
But,
Screws that are loose.
But we can be put back together again. Yes. Is good.
Melissa, is there anything else you want to talk about in your transition that was difficult?
Yeah, so I think that one of the other big things that was difficult was not only was I processing all of my own emotions and grief and confusion, but I was also the mom, and I was still trying to then help my kids navigate what just happened. We had a golden retriever that we got in Peru when we had been there for maybe 3 months, when he was a puppy.
Oh.
He was adorable, and he was brilliant, and he was like a therapy dog that we didn't even know that we needed and that we didn't even realize we had. And we had to leave him behind. And
that's hard.
That was just awful. Like, there's just no other way to describe that except it was horrible. So the kids, of course, they missed Capitan so much. It was hard to readjust, and our daughter had developed some health issues while we were down there that she maybe had even before we went that we just didn't know about.
Okay.
And, we kind of naively hoped that maybe moving back, some of those things would just resolve, and they didn't. And in some cases, things kept getting worse. And so I would say that, figuring out how to navigate our new kind of mental health challenges that we were all facing were hard. But one of the things that helped me realize the importance of the mental health piece was when we were at that retreat in Colorado. They talked about how when you live in another country, it's easy to lose your sense of what's normal. Like, you are under so much stress because of the challenges of being in a different culture, not having your normal support system around you. And, no matter how comfortable you get in another place, there are still going to be things that are different for you than there are for the people that just grew up there. Like, it's just, there's no way of avoiding that there is extra stress. And so you don't necessarily even know how bad was it or how bad is it, because you don't know what to compare to anymore.
So how would you, what advice would you give to people to help them understand what's normal, or help them to understand what's normal, healthy, what are normal, healthy mental states, right? If you want to go into that.
Yeah, that's a good question, which maybe that leads to to the other question of, something that's helped since then or then. And I would say therapy is really helpful.
It's lovely.
I actually think, whether it's a professional therapist or whether it's just another person, it's so different now with Zoom and, being able to do video conferencing with people. We did a little bit of Skype while we were there, but it wasn't as good, and it wasn't as natural. Like, we just didn't think to do it all the time back then. And I think that maybe connecting with people back in your home country, and even connecting with, whether it's just other people or coaches or therapists or whoever, but talking to other people and kind of telling them about your life can be really helpful, because when you tell people your story and you see their eyes get bigger and bigger and bigger, And they can tell you, wow, that really is a lot to be going through at once or to be dealing with or whatever. I think that it can kind of help us get back to a little bit of reality that, oh, it really is a lot. Like sometimes we try to talk ourselves out of thinking that what we're going through is a big deal because we just like, oh, well, whatever, other people have it harder. There's always somebody that has it harder. And we can just kind of try to minimize everything we're going through. And so sometimes letting other people see into and speak into, our stories can help maybe just give us another perspective that can be helpful.
Yes.
I think.
Yes. Whether we realize that, wow, what we are going through is a big deal and maybe we should get more help or just validating how we feel, right? Like, I mean, not only do we build solidarity with friends when we're going through similar things, but just it helps us to know that there's somebody listening to us. There's somebody who understands us. And maybe if they don't understand us, at least they're listening.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else that you want to share that helped you before we move on?
I think that another thing that has really been a process but has been helpful and healing for me is just making new friends again. I love people. The church that we were a part of before we left that sent us out, I loved those people dearly, and I missed them so much. And I love my family, and I love people. And so when we moved down there, like I did not hold back from loving the people that we were working with. Like I loved them so much. And it didn't even take effort. Like it was easy. And I loved them in every way. And, but when we had to leave and move back, it hurt so much that I felt like I went from being a sea anemone with all of its tentacles like open and waving in the water to closing up and like pulling everything in. And I just couldn't allow myself to attach to people for a long time because the potential for future separation just made me never want to get close to people again because it had been so hard to say goodbye to people again. It was hard to say goodbye to people when we left here, and then it was hard to say goodbye to people when we left there. And so when we came back and we, ended up back at a different church, our old original church where we'd gotten married. And it took me a long time to want to get to be willing to open my heart to people again, because I didn't want anybody to love me, because I didn't want anybody to cry when I left. And I didn't want, I just kind of stayed emotionally distant from people for quite a while. And, but then, I would meet and become friends with people like you at school that we could connect about our experiences living in other places and moving back. And that was meaningful. And then a couple years ago, somebody who's another mutual friend of ours invited me to a book study that she was hosting at her house. And I went and I realized that, wow, all of these women are people that I, didn't really know at that point. And it was an opportunity to make new friends. And so just being brave enough to do that and not just fall back on my old friends that I had before we left. Yeah. Being healing enough to be able to make new friends again, has been a really good thing. So that and therapy.
friends and therapy.
Yes.
I love that.
Therapy.
Yeah. That's great advice.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions that we wanted you to pick from. And for our audience, we have questions like, how does your time abroad continue to flavor your life? What rhythms do you have in place? what do you do with all these memories and relationships and love for the place and the people, And then do you have a favorite funny story? So what do you want to share with us?
Okay, so I think I'm going to go with what do you do with all the feels, because that's, sort of a theme in my life. What do you do with all the feels? So
with your sea anemone.
Yes,
legs.
yes, right. Exactly. Yeah. And I would say one of the things that I would say I've done with the memories and the relationships and the love, all the love that I feel still for people is I might end up, I've done lots of journaling. I did lots and lots of journaling while we were there and when we came back. And I might take all of that and put it into a book someday, because
yes.
I want to do that. And things like eating Peruvian food. And every year at Christmas, we hang up our Peruvian Christmas ornaments. And I put out my Peruvian nativity sets that I, bought when we were there. And so all those little things are fun. And we eat panettone at Christmas time, which is, a big tradition in Peru, even though it's actually an Italian bread. But one of the things I think that also has been super helpful about all the feelings and stuff was when I learned how to recognize my little mini grief cycle and just learning how to grieve, because there's a lot to grieve when you move away from a place or people that you love. And, whether it's when you're going to the place overseas or when you're coming back from being abroad, there's, anytime you go through transitions, there's grief. And I learned about myself that that grief would kind of start bubbling up from inside of me. And at first it would just make me grumpy and irritable. And I would just get annoyed with my family or with, whatever. I would just be grumpy and not for any particular reason. And then at some point I would finally realize, oh, wait, I'm not angry. I think I'm sad about something. But as these emotions were surfacing from, maybe from my gut up to my heart, I would realize, okay, I'm sad about something, but I don't know what yet. I would feel the grief before I even knew what was it that I'm sad about. I don't even know. I just know I'm sad about something. And then finally it would rise high enough to be up to my head, where all of a sudden I would think of whatever the thing was that I was sad about, and I would start crying, get teary, and then realize, oh, that's what it is. That's what I'm missing right now. And when it would finally hit my brain, then I could let myself cry and I could let myself just feel the feels. I think that was one of the most important things that I got from the therapist I was saying at that point when we came back, was just, when there's grief, to feel it, not to try to stuff it and not to try to shut it down, but just to go ahead and feel it. And that was part of the way to process it, was just to not put it away. And but it was really helpful when I finally recognized that cycle, because then when I was grumpy, I would ask myself earlier in the process, okay, wait, is there something else going on? Because, there often was. And instead of just wondering, what is wrong with everybody around me? I was like, oh, no, I'm just sad about something and I don't know what it is yet. So
that's so interesting that your body and your emotions tell you that you're sad.
Oh, and the other piece of that I have to mention too is that almost every time that I would be sad about something, it's the logical part of my brain does not understand and would try to talk me out of it and try to, oh, but it's fine, this, that, or whatever. Or what really is wrong with you? And it's I would have this battle of the, my brain and my heart and this little logical robotic professor part of my brain trying to explain why it was really all fine. And, just learning to tell that part to be quiet, because its job is not to feel. Its job is to make decisions, and it doesn't matter if that part of my brain doesn't understand why this hurts so much, because that part doesn't have to understand. The part of my brain and my heart that feels the things, that's its job. And even now, like going through these stories and trying to decide what was I going to talk about and whatever, like it stirs up all of these feelings and stuff again. And we did, a couple of years after we moved back, we did get to go back and visit people, and we got to see our dog again. And it was just
so good.
It was such a sweet, sweet trip, and we had so much fun. And there have been a couple of times within those first 2 years back that one of the families got to come and see us here, actually, also, which was so cool.
Precious time.
Yeah. So stirring up all these memories and everything, it just reminds me that even if I'm not on a super regular basis reaching out to people, it doesn't mean that I don't still love them, because when I think of them, I still miss them, and I still wish that, I could be with them. And it's so, even though there's part of me that's like, oh, it still aches a little bit, that ache in some ways is kind of precious at this point, because it's sort of proof that, okay, yeah, I really did love those people in that place, and I still do. And so the fact that it still kind of hurts is okay.
Yeah.
That part is never probably going to go away. Because, and I don't really want it to. I don't want to stop loving those people in that place where we were. And so it's okay. Yeah.
So Melissa, we're almost done. And what's a lasting word of encouragement or advice that you can give to our listeners?
My last little tidbit of advice or encouragement is just to know that it's okay and it's normal for transitions to be hard and messy and exhausting. That getting used to new cultures or coming back to your old culture, knowing everything about culture shock or transition shock or, culture adjustment, whatever they want to call it these days. Knowing everything about it doesn't mean it's not going to be hard. Just like knowing that a pool of water or a lake is icy cold and telling yourself that ahead of time doesn't mean that when you jump in, it's not going to take your breath away. Jumping into a new culture or jumping back into an old culture is going to take your breath away, even if you're prepared mentally, but that's okay. And you'll survive. And it's, that we need people, and not to try to do these things alone, but that, you can do it. It'll take time, but you can do it.
Yeah. Sí se puede.
That's right. Amen.
Melissa, thank you so much for being interviewed and telling your stories about your time in Peru and your transition back to the United States. And I know that many people can relate to what you're saying and have been encouraged by it.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
As we land this interview, we hope that you have been inspired by Melissa's stories. She shared that sometimes our time abroad does not go as planned, and the return home is affected by a heart-wrenching decision to leave. We come home in pieces. Over time, we can get put back together with self-care, like knowing our own grief cycle, seeking professional help and therapy, making new friendships, and allowing ourselves to love deeply once again. No matter what leg of the journey you're on, we are grateful you have brought us along with you. Thanks so much for listening, friends. We will see you next time. Come back next time for a Round Trip Stories Customs episode, where we'll reminisce, laugh, and converse about a random topic related to customs and culture. Want to be part of future conversations? Join our email list and get the podcast equivalent of TSA PreCheck, including a sneak peek at upcoming customs topics and an invitation to share your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. See the link in the show notes to sign up.
Thanks so much for listening, friends. We'll see you next time.